I'd like to confirm if we are good to go, Sylvie. Just a minute.
All right. You're most. Sylvan, are we good to go? I would like you to confirm that we can.
Yes, we are.
All right. All right. Good evening, Uganda, and a warm welcome to wherever you're joining us from. This is yet another conversation hosted by the Alliance for National Transformation. This evening, we will be speaking to General Mugisha Muntu, Gregory, who will be speaking to us about matters in regards to governance. But also we are going to dive into the question of governance of this nation in doing an introspection of the 62 years that we've had. We'll also look at some of things that are making news, trending in our country, but also leaning to the question of governance. So from wherever you're joining us, thank you very much for making time. And would like to say in a special way, thank you, General Mugisha Muntu, for making time. General, you could take a minute or two to say hello to the listeners.
Good evening, dear viewers and listeners. Thank you, Peter, for hosting me.
All right. So, General, we'll get straight into it. This conversation. As a country, we recently celebrated 62 years of independence. What do you make of these 62 years of independence, General? Are we as a country indeed independent? Are we moving forward? What are some of the things that, in your perspective, we have done as a country, or we're actually still struggling? What is your perspective about these 62 years of independence, General?
Had 62 years of trials in terms of becoming a country built on a firm foundation where values are shared by our society, values which are common in societies which are stable, which progress, where you find that every individual citizen is able to access equal opportunities, that there is justice, that they can access services due to them because the citizens are contributors to national economies since they pay taxes, that they are able to make decisions, and that those decisions processed through existing governance infrastructure, that they would be respected, that the leaders would recognize that when they get an opportunity to go into leadership positions, they are there to serve. Now, we have not achieved that yet. And I think for a country to be determined to be independent or to be identified or to pass as an independent country, I think all those factors would have to be in place. Struggling for the 62 years that we've gone through. There are different regimes. Of course, the first decade, there was the UPC government, which unfortunately was overthrown by the military. The military also spent close to about 8 or 9 years. And then there was a period of about 2 years, the UNRF, when there are quite a number of leaders that came in, like Saruri was there for 68 days. And then the late Benaisa, who was there for close to 1 year and a half or thereabouts. And then the military junta, which was led by the chairperson of the military commission, who was Paul Muanga, that also spent there possibly about a year. And then the UPC2 came in 81 until 85, when unfortunately, again, the military took over. 6 months under General Tito Okello. And then took power in 1986 under the umbrella of the movement system. And I participated in that. And our expectation was that we were going to have a new beginning, to build a foundation on the basis of which would become transition from being a banana republic to a full-fledged stable country where the values I've already talked about would be established. Down the road, we lost direction again. And now, as anybody would, most of the people would know, we're in another phase of struggle to try to achieve or fulfill what the desires we've had, the desires that we've had as citizens from 1962. So it's still an ongoing process. We have not reached that level where you can call this country independent. One, the internal dynamics, which weaken us to the extent that therefore we are not able to call ourselves independent because there are most decisions we cannot make on our own and stand our ground as a country. Because if you are not economically independent, there's no you can be politically independent. The two are intertwined. And it seems it's a factor which has eluded most of the leaders from 1962. So it's up to us who are currently involved in these struggles and the younger generation that's also part of this process now to work day and night to ensure that we're able to achieve that independence which is still eluding us. Yes, Peter?
Yeah, thank you, General. And I think you've highlighted very fundamentally three structures, and you say our independence question is still ongoing. General, and I want to highlight, we have a government present in power which has nearly is about to make 40 years in power. What do you make of the economics of this country, especially if we have a debt burden as of 2023 that is Uganda shillings, 96.1 trillion. Do you really think that this government in place has done a lot to muzzle this question? Or, like you said, what can be done to ensure that we work towards economic freedom? Because I think that's another pertinent question. If a country is not economically, independent, then other things are underlying. What can we do about this debt burden, which increasingly continues year in and out? General.
It's dependent upon us as the Ugandan people. One, to recognize that without a team of leaders that are disciplined and are able to frugally manage the resources of the country, that it's very, very difficult for any country to liberate itself or to become independent, for that matter. It all goes back to the nature of leadership. And at the core of leadership, leaders who build nations, who create an environment in which the nation prospers, the citizens prosper, one of the biggest factors is discipline. We lack that a lot in this part of the world. And therefore, my hope is that all of us as citizens, not all of us, there's no way you can have 100% of the population in a country recognize what is necessary to be done. But at least to have a majority of the people, and more so the critical number of the political elite, who would understand that, for us to be able to build ourselves as a country and be respected amongst the rest of the 180 or 90 something nations on this planet, that we must be disciplined, we must be focused, that we must be able to utilize the resources that we have as a country, exploit them to our advantage, and build a foundation on the basis of which there can be sustained economic growth and development. There must be a critical number of people within the political elite who are able to make that conclusion, and therefore also have the organizational abilities to team together in regard to that, regardless of whether they are actually in even one political party or not, because parties ordinarily would compete. If we can have that consensus, then the parties can compete based on different policy options. But we have not even reached the consensus that we need to be disciplined, that we need to be focused, that we need to exert our capabilities in terms of exploiting our national resources to the advantage of the country. If we have made that conclusion at a theoretical level, we have still failed to put it into practice. And that's what we have to focus on. And the only way we can break out of this vicious cycle, is to reach that conclusion or build the consensus. And the consensus is not being at the theoretical level in terms of what we say, and it be translated into a practical reality that we do what we talk about. So my hope, therefore, is that we keep this debate alive until at a point when hopefully that consensus will be built. Yes, Peter.
Yes, and right there, I think that's where the gist of the question is.
Because you talked about date. How will you manage date if you have no discipline? Because if there is no discipline, it means that you don't care about how you manage the economy. Because if you are spendthrifts, if you are putting money into unproductive areas, if the trillions of shillings are put in renting support, for example, I mean, this regime is basically surviving on renting support, and that money is manipulated out of the budget from ministries, and they stacked, like now we're going to an electoral period next year. They're stacking loads of money from ministries. Of course, on the other end, of course, also putting businesses and some of the investors whom they lean on to build the war chest that they want to apply next year. But even in the course of the whole period since the last election, you can see the number of projects which have faltered because of the money which is stolen. The money is stolen because, again, it's also in form of renting support. Because this regime is dependent on people who are wealthy, who are able to wield influence, but also who are able to channel resources to this regime for political reasons. And therefore, because the General Museveni basically is not able to tackle corruption, run these individuals who are running all over the country, causing mayhem in terms of corruption tendencies, because he needs them politically. That in itself has a very negative impact in terms of resource allocation. So it goes back again to problems of in this. Therefore, there is no way this regime where we are at can manage debt, external debt, plus the domestic debt. The domestic debt, there are so many people, many business people right now who are selling their properties because they mortgaged, they supplied the government departments, they have not been paid, some for 1, 2, 3 years, debt is accumulated, and there's no way they are going to be paid anytime soon. Because instead of frugal management of national resources, the regime is going to keep on stealing money for purpose of politics. We are now around, we are within almost into the electoral cycle, which is coming next year. So what is going to happen? So don't expect that, for example, in the next 1 year or so that you're going to see any improvements in terms of debt management. It's just simply not possible. And two, any group which gets in had better build itself to be more disciplined than any that we've ever had. Because any group which takes power is going to be confronted with that same situation. An increasing population, low levels of high levels of unemployment, high deep levels of debt, domestic as well as international. So any group which is going to be able to salvage this country must have maximum discipline, managing themselves and also managing the economy. Yes, Peter?
All right, General, you give very detailed analysis, and I think you gelled into my second question, which points to the social structure in light of the 62 years. And that leads to my second question, General, is you've touched the element that we have a very young population. And the second to that is, I would like your scenario. Build for us a scenario as ANT, as somebody who has been around. How do we deal with, there are people who say we lack an identity. We have an identity crisis as Ugandans. How can we build, these are 62 years since we got independence in 1962. How do we build our social fabric as a country moving forward with this young population, General?
Then the only group that will be able to build an environment in which there is fairness, where there is justice, where there is equality before the law, where there are equal opportunities by all. Any group which does that, out of that environment, the sense of belonging naturally flows into people's hearts and minds. Once any group establishes that environment, where any citizen, regardless of which part of the country they come from, regardless of height, regardless of weight, regardless of gender, regardless of religion, regardless of what language they speak, if they feel that one, the taxes that they pay are being put to good use, two, that they as citizens are able to exercise their rights and freedoms. And that if, for example, a young man out of university or a young woman out of university can get a job without bribing anybody, without having to know anybody, but they're able to get that job based on merit. and someone goes, a business person goes and gets a contract because there is an established system within which they can compete fairly and be able to get that contract. That environment automatically creates a sense of belonging of that citizen in the society in which he or she is, in this case, Uganda. That creates an identity of a people who know that we are Ugandans. There's another way you can create that. Unless those values which we talk about a lot are implemented, we translate them from the theoretical plane at which it is always hovering and translate it into practice. It becomes a culture where anybody who don't even care who the minister is, who the president is, they are wherever they are doing their own businesses, and that they know that there are systems which function, the institutions which are the foundation on the basis of which the country is governed, and therefore they are living in a country where they know that there are certain laws. I can predict what I intend to do. I will do it. Nobody is going to harass me. Nobody is going to curtail me. Nobody is going to destabilize me, because there are rules and regulations that are followed. And all of us, regardless of who you are, whether you're a minister, a president, a commander of an army, or an army officer, or a police officer, whoever you are, that we are all equal before the law. Once any society manages to establish that, that's the best environment any citizen would want to live in. And when you talk about that, this is not magic. We have seen many countries where that experience pertains. And to me, there's nothing which has been done by any other person, any other group of people, any other country, any other people, wherever they are, that we can't do. So there's nothing any human being has that any other doesn't have, regardless of race, regardless of color, regardless of gender. We're all created with the same capabilities. Again, I think that's my hope is that that's, again, a consensus that we need to reach as a Ugandan people. To know there's nothing anybody else has done elsewhere that we can't do. Fortunately enough, we have many Ugandans who are educated and who have, had the opportunity to go elsewhere. There are many young people who have been to Malaysia, in the Malaysian universities, in universities in China, some have been in Russia, others have been in America, others have been in Europe, others, a few maybe in Latin America, others in some of the Arab countries. And those who have been to universities clearly know that when they are there in whatever discipline they are, that they compete as well as anybody. We have had those who have even excelled wherever they have been. So intelligence has nothing to do with color, has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do with ethnicity, has nothing to do with religion. When any country establishes good standards of education and the citizens are able to access it, then those citizens are able to acquire those very capabilities that others have applied elsewhere to do the things that they have done, which may seem amazing to us because many times people think that we can't do them, yet we can. It's only the environment that is being limited, because the nature of education is a very, very critical factor. And therefore, again, one hopes that once we reach that conclusion and we build a consensus, therefore any group which is able to take power thereafter is going to focus a lot on the standards of education. Because education is it's I don't know what, it is something that anybody can access or establish in their country, even when they don't have any other resource. You may not have natural resources, you may not have anything else, but as long as you're able to establish a high level standard of education, that country will develop. Doesn't matter even if they don't have any other form of resource. Education is a core factor. And therefore, my hope is that any group which is able to take power is going to concentrate on that. It's an equalizer. That's the word I was looking at. Education is an equalizer. Once you have it well established, you can compete on the global stage in terms of innovation, in terms of whatever area of endeavor any other society has excelled in, that we can. We have had a few examples. We see like now China is almost overtaking the whole world. But 50 years ago, China was literally a third world country. We have seen the cycles which have been going through as different societies. We've seen Europe has excelled, America has excelled at some point because, again, education. Japan, same thing. So we can see the emerging economies like China, which has excelled at this point in time. We see the Korea, South Korea, we see the Malaysias, which are coming on. Education is a big factor. But one of the areas which makes it even more clear is Japan, because Japan doesn't have a lot of natural resources. Education is the one which enabled them to become highly competitive on the global stage in terms of manufacturing. Now imagine for us in this region, if we are talking about East Africa, once we have good education, we have good governance, and then the natural resources we have, what on earth would hold us down where we are at? The sky would be the limit. We really need to wake up, those of us who have had the opportunity to go to schools, rather than lament from morning until evening, day in, day out, for 62 years.
All right, General, I think you lay out a very good case, but I have, as we wind up on a reflection of the 62 years, there's been an argument, and you can speak to this, that in terms of the political structure, that what we are using is something that was handed down to us. We've not sat down as Ugandans to examine this thing that was handed down to us in 1962 by the colonialists. We've not had any sort of referendum in terms of saying, how do we as Ugandans identify in terms of the political governance? What do you make of that? And then secondly, something that you touched in terms of political will. What can we do as a country to build such great effort towards political will? Because you said that it's one of the things that is lacking. What do you make of that, General? In just
political will is lacking, but that to me that is not the biggest challenge, because even if leaders, political leaders at the top level don't have the political will, the problem I notice is that we seem to want to depend on the goodwill of leaders. That's not how society should operate. Citizens should know that the leader is supposed to offer services using the taxes they pay. And if he or she is found wanting, for the citizens simply tell the guy to, evacuate. So we have to build that capability. Once we have a number of people within the political elite, significant number of them, who understand that. Also, two, who know that to reach the level where leaders respect citizens, that there are certain sacrifices that they have to go through. Because by nature, we are selfish as human beings. Most times, many of the leaders, a number of times, the leaders don't respect citizens out of goodwill. They respect citizens because the citizens take a stand. And therefore, the leaders have no alternative other than to respect the citizens. But if the citizens remain cowed and somehow hope that their survival is dependent on the goodwill of it, that society is doomed to go through, harrowing times, Because I can tell you that most times we as human beings, the moment you're in a position of leadership, there are challenges of leadership itself. Power corrupts, as they say. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you have a leader who doesn't fear the citizens, what do you think they are going to do? There are very few leaders who are able to check themselves, who have the discipline to rein in their natural desires for power, for pomp, for glory. So why should we depend just on the discipline of the leaders as individuals? would rather have a citizen which is conscious, that is aware that they have the right to check the leaders, and for them take a stand when leaders lose track. So it's no longer an issue of just blaming leaders day in, day out. They failed. Many of them have failed to rein their natural desires, which we are all born with. So they don't have the necessary discipline to rein in those emotions of, instant gratification. Most of the leaders, the moment they get there, that natural emotion of instant gratification simply overwhelms them, enslaves them, and as a natural outcome of that, they therefore load it on the people. And then the people who seem to hope that the leaders can wake up and be good keep waiting. You can wait until kingdom come. If people choose only to wait and not to do the very things which need to be done, at times which require sacrifices, we're in that dilemma. I mean, the current environment is so exemplifies that you can have leaders who do things which are absolutely abnormal in regard to the expectations of the population, people who pay taxes. That someone can go and abuse your taxes and people simply remain cowed because they want to survive at an individual level, but eventually pay a price anyway, because there are many people who die because they lack drugs, hospitals. There are many people who suffer day in, day out because they lack jobs. Yet there should be jobs if money was applied in a disciplined way to grow an economy. There are those who don't have money to bribe. So there are many who sleep hungry. They could even go to hospital and they lack drugs and they die. But somehow many want to keep quiet to simply survive. It's an unfortunate situation, but it's a reality. We have to keep working day and night and keep conscientizing the population, speaking ceaselessly, continuously, until that critical number is built, so it can shift the balance of forces in favor of people who want to build sanity in this country. Yes, Peter.
All right. And right there, General, is where you lead me. In case you just joined us, this space, we're hosting General Muntu, who is speaking to us in a reflection of the 62 years of independence, but also shedding perspective in light of the political climate, and also, sharing his insight on where we forge our way to the next probably 62 years. And General, right there, about something that you've rightly touched is going to be my next question in terms of building a citizenry that can take charge. General, in 2006, you're one of the people who, and I think that was your point of departure with the current regime, if I may quote, when there was an amendment of the term limits, and you've said that was the beginning of the crisis of this country. General, what do you make as somebody who has been, I think, in a lack of a better word, politely defiant, but you spoke out in the 2006 amendment. What do you make of these protests, especially the fact that you've said we need to build a citizenry that tells people who are looting government funds, people who are misusing their offices? What do you make of the recent protests, especially walk to parliament, in light of that? And how do you think that is a contributing factor towards rebuilding this citizenry? General.
The protests are legitimate in the first place. And naturally, first, let me say, we as human beings are wired differently. There are people who are inclined to respond to challenges of the nature like we face, or which are faced in other countries, of bad rule. where there are people who believe that you need to use means other than the use of, for example, diplomatic means or organizational means to organize to throw out a regime out through a political process or an electoral process. There are people who believe that you should, for example, get arms and fight. However, engaged in use of weapons to fight. Because at that point, a number of us had reached a conclusion that there was no other way out other than to take arms, fight, take power, and establish a new foundation on the basis of which we could build good governance systems. So those who were inclined that way to be able to take up weapons and go and fight did so. Of course, in the course of it, we were committing treason. If anybody of us would be arrested at that point in time, you could easily be tried in the courts of law and you'd be found guilty for engaging in treasonous activities. But by God's grace, we succeeded. And we established the dispensation that started in 1986. And along the way, of course, lost direction. Again, new challenges emerged. And there are different responses applied by different people depending on how they are wired. Fortunate enough, in this particular case, in the Constitution, this Constitution legitimized those avenues of citizens consciously choosing like a path of defiance to oppose a regime which they believe has lost track and is contravening the Constitution. So it's legitimate. And there are also many people who are wired that way. So I have never had any doubt in my mind that the people who are inclined to use defiance as a means of advancing a struggle to oust this regime, it's legitimate, it's lawful, and those who have the courage to do so need to focus, but also apply discipline and build the necessary capabilities to reach that end. The only weakness I still notice is that people who are inclined to that seem only to react at particular times when there are things which spark of anger within the population. And yet, in my own estimation, when you want to use defiance or civil disobedience as a means of struggle, you have to engage in a 24/7 activities to build the necessary capabilities to the point where you have the capacity to oust a regime, which is not something which happens in one day or in 1 week or in 1 month. To build such capabilities can at times take years. And therefore, the people who are inclined to use civil disobedience as a means of struggle need to spend time, resources, effort, and know that at times it can happen in a short time. But also know that there are times when it can take longer than they would desire it to take. But to have the discipline to keep building, mobilize resources, train people, raise consciousness, organize different layers of leaders, so that in the event that there is a crackdown from a regime, and it happens all the time, all over the world, regimes will always respond in a way to create fear within the population. When it's an autocratic regime, when it's an authoritarian regime, you also have to prepare those who are engaged in that kind of struggle psychologically, to know all that, to prepare themselves, but also to ensure that when one layer of leaders is taken out, another one immediately emerges. That's the only way you survive. And therefore, you have to be able to take the risk. You must prepare people to take risk. It's part of that struggle. So when some are arrested, when some are maimed, when others are killed, that you know that that's part of that struggle. It's like those who are in the army. When you are in war, you know that there are people who are going to be shot, who are going to die. You're going to bury them. Others will be wounded. They'll be evacuated. They'll be taken to hospitals. Those who don't have grievous injuries, and when they get out of hospital, they are healed. Some go back to the front. But you keep fighting until you achieve your end state. It's the same thing in the civil disobedience. So to me, there are people who were disappointed by the few numbers that turned up. I wasn't one of them because I know what it means. I also know what it takes. And therefore, I would encourage those who are wired, and also inclined to use civil disobedience as a method of struggle, not to give up and to keep focused on building. It's not an overnight thing. It's not a garden. It's not a tea party. It's tough, and it requires resolve. It requires courage. It requires organizational skills.
Okay, General, you, and I think you've put it right that we need to be able to take risk. We'll come to that element, but still picking you up on the recent things that have been happening. We have over 35 Ugandans as we speak, General, this evening, who lost their lives to an incident in Kitezi. There's a cropping mechanism, which has, some people say it's cropping, but some people say it's been there. What do you make of the reactionary syndrome by government to only come out to spend money to people who are in a camp, to come up and spend money to people who are on a camp, people who have lost their lives, and now they are spending it in an evacuation? What do you make of this reactionary syndrome? And as a leader of a party that is saying we need to build, how can we fight against this reactionary syndrome by this government that is still in power? How can we, what contributions can we make to this reactionary syndrome in light of the Kitezi incident?
I don't think this regime is going to change its mindset. It operates from that mindset. Most of the reactions are knee-jerk. When something happens, they just react. And they react in a manner of, unfortunately, we have a gullible public. Because people die and then they give maybe 10 million, 20 million, and then people feel appeased. So they forget about the cause of the problem. I don't think this regime is going to change from that. And therefore, if the population wants something that is different, they need to invest in building something which is going to be better than what we see now. Because even any other group which comes in must be very well organized to operate in a way that you have got long-term plans, then medium-term plans, then short-term plans. But even when you are focusing on the implementation of the short-term must be inbuilt, linked to the medium and the long-term. I mean, like Kitezi. It didn't fall from the skies. Kitezi has been there for a long time. So people must have known that there is a likelihood that there can be a disaster at some point. So Kitezi definitely didn't happen by accident. It was something that was, a disaster in the making all the time. And that's not only about Kitezi. I mean, we have seen people who have been hit by landslides in some parts of the country, where you know that every rainy season that there are bound to be landslides. Now, when you go to the departments of government that are supposed to take care of those kinds of situations, you find that they are starved of resources. They don't have an adequate budget to react to emergencies. And when emergencies happen, people die. And then the reactionary nature of the regime, as you indicated, they come in, they pour in resources and a bad aid. Then the people feel appeased at that point. And then we go to slumber and something else happens. Same thing, we remain in that kind of unfortunate vicious cycle in regard to how this country is run. We lack discipline, basically, in the manner of governance. And therefore, my hope is that all of us who really want to see a better future, that we must invest time and effort and resources in building capabilities in the vehicles, the alternative vehicles of governance. Because this regime, at some point, I can't put my finger, I can't say it's tomorrow or the day after. What I know is that change is going to happen at some point. And therefore, the vehicles of governance, in this case, which are parties, or another group which doesn't believe in parties, because you bump into people who say, oh, parties won't work. Whatever they believe in, they need to build the capabilities so that if they are the ones who would go into power, those who don't believe in parties, that they would have built somehow the organizational capabilities to manage things different. Because if no group is able to do that, then even when this regime gets out of power, which will happen, it means we'll go through another cycle of frustration, of lamentation, of renewed struggles, and then that group also gets ousted. Until a time when we have a group that is better organized, that is focused, that looks at things in terms of long-term, medium-term, short-term plans, and they have got the necessary discipline to translate what is, at the policy level and implement it into practical delivery of services in the different areas. Nothing ever happens in life. But accident happen to elevate levels of living of any society out of conscious, deliberate, focused, consistent actions. That requires people who are going to do analysis and be able to know the solution to different challenges that there are, and have the necessary discipline, and are able to also to make the necessary sacrifices, and also to ensure that they're not overwhelmed by what overwhelms most of the leaders on this continent, what I've already referred to, the emotion of instant gratification. And a group which succeeds must be able to, at an individual level, break out of that, build the discipline for restraint, so that this thing is good, but if I take it now, it's going to be costly for tomorrow, the week after, the month after. It's like you have seed, you have a garden, and you don't have, if it's beans, if I may use beans for example, you don't have anything to use as sauce, nothing. It's only those beans, 1 kilo of beans. You must make a decision. Are you going to forfeit sauce and eat whatever you have, whether it's potatoes or bananas, without sauce or with salt, and grow those beans so that down 3 months you are able to harvest those beans, and therefore you have enough now, some to eat, some to sell, others to replant? Or are you going, because you lack sauce, to eat the seed? That's what most people do here. That's our consciousness. That's the problem. And some people may say, that's not true. It's self-evident. The mess we are in is because of that. Because the leaders have no capability for restraint. They want immediate wealth. They want immediate this. They want immediate that. Not that they invest in terms of sustainable economic growth and development of the country, and then as individuals they tap into that. No, they want it now. So they just eat the seed. That's why we're in this mess. And therefore, any group which is going to break us out of this vicious cycle must have that understanding and must build a significant number of leaders who will work together in tandem to ensure that they build what is necessary for us to break this country out of the vicious cycle we are in. It's not going to happen by accident, because there's no group of leaders that's going to go into power and they don't meet temptation. All of them, all of us will, whichever group goes in. First thing you meet when you get into power is temptation. I mean, in a group like in this case, which goes into power, nothing is going to check them. There's no parliament, the civil service is in shambles, corruption is deep. Nothing will check them. Any group which goes into power that has no capability to check itself, then you know that we are going through another phase of struggle. Because if they don't check themselves, that means they want to build the systems necessary to check themselves, check them later, and in a subsequent group that comes thereafter. So if they can't check themselves, they want to build the institutions. So they'll continue with the same culture which is now prevailing. So that's the kind of situation we are facing. That's the reality, and we need to deal with it. We need to deal with it, not shy away from it. This is a conversation we need to keep on having constantly until we hopefully wake up.
Okay. General, you've led me to something very pertinent. You've said we're not checking ourselves. If I now could lead you to my other question.
Yes, Peter, I'm not able to pick you, unfortunately.
Are you able to pick me now?
I'm able to pick you now.
Wonderful. So, General, I was saying, you've led me to the second question. You've talked about we are unable to check ourselves. As somebody who served in the highest ranking office of the UPDF, what do you make of tweets of our current CDF? And in light of that, in checking yourself, is it something that in your position now, is it something permissible? And two, maybe a link to that is, what are the ramifications of these tweets that we have seen come out in light of the transition question that we have, but also in terms of what are the ramifications in terms of the diplomatic relations between the countries that have been maybe mentioned in these tweets, but also the global village we're in? What do you make of this as somebody who served in the army, General?
Of course, unfortunately, it's the image problem of the country. Because even anybody who doesn't know about Uganda, if the first thing they hear about Uganda, for example, Chief of Defense Forces sends tweets, and then this person who's watching Uganda, maybe they are trying to come and invest, or maybe they want to come as tourists or whatever they want to do. They want to make a decision about the country. The image suffers, because anybody who read the tweets would know that the country they are looking at, in this case, Uganda, basically would qualify to be seen as a banana republic. That therefore there must be high levels of indiscipline in the country. But I no longer put this really on General Mpuuga. This issue is I no longer even related to General Mpuuga. I no longer even look in that direction. The problem is with the commander-in-chief. Because any officer can, commit errors, commit crimes, make mistakes. If there are no systems to check any individual in the disciplined forces, if they cannot deal with it at that level, then the buck stops with the commander-in-chief. So if you find all those kinds of tweets being sent and the damage to the image of the country and all the things that go along with that, and then the commander-in-chief is not reacting, then the problem is with the commander-in-chief. It ceases to be a problem now of the army, because nobody in the army can bring a chief of defense forces to order. It's only the commander-in-chief. So General Museveni is simply sleeping on his job. For whatever reason, I can't decipher. Whatever makes him not act.
Okay. So, General, do you think, in your own view, that this has an effect? Because we're looking at somebody who is in charge of. This is the Chief of Defense Forces. Recently, we saw him calling to the attention of the masses, a whole ambassador of the United States of America. Is Uganda at crossroads with some of these international diplomatic relations? Should we say that we're having a challenge? What is your take specifically?
I basically I can't understand An army is a very sensitive institution in any country. One of the things that any army needs to be regarded for is discipline of the officers and men. Also sensitive in the nature that they hold weapons. And the army is the foundation of state. If the moment an army gives way, if the army for whatever reason disintegrates, that country ceases to exist. The country will be in turmoil. So the army ordinarily is supposed to be treated completely different from how any other institution is treated. That's why it requires maximum discipline in the officers and men in the armed institution. But it seems to me that for whatever strange reason, General 7 seems no longer to recognize that fact. He's either underestimating the potential consequences of not acting in situations of that nature, or he's trapped himself. That's also a possibility. Maybe he doesn't know how to act. Or for some strange reason, he has become careless. Why do I say so? Because even if you forget about the military aspect alone, look at the economic aspect. People who invest their millions of dollars, millions of euros, or whatever money they are going to put into a country, mostly if they are big investments, always will do country risk analysis. Nobody is going to put their money in a country, $50 million, $100 million, without doing a country risk analysis. So if you are wherever you are, you want to bring money in a country, and you see what is happening, you would have to be worried. You'd have to be, you'd have to be worried. If you don't get worried, then you must be having a lot of cash to waste. You don't care what happens. I just simply can't understand how anybody in charge of a country will not even recognize that. If I had a lot of money and I was going to invest in a country and I see those kind of tweets from a commander, a chief of defense forces of that country, and the commander in chief is not acting, I would hesitate to put my money in that country, to be honest with you.
I think General, you make very, very strong points right there. I want to take you now to a transition question. Like earlier, I asked you that were we handed over something that we have as a country failed to analyze, and I will lead you that I'll join that question in twofold. The CDF that we're talking about has tweeted and said, in one of his tweets, he said that this country will not allow anybody else who is not part of the military to lead this country. What do you make of the militarization of this country in our quest for democracy, in light of the values that you, as a representative of the Alliance for National Transformation, what do you make of this overly militarization of our country? And when do you think this will cease? And what can we do as a country to end the over-militarization, the involvement of the army in the governance question of this country? General.
Armies are drawn into politics because of failure of resolving of the political questions by the politicians. Always, even where they are coups, is because of the failure of solving political problems by the leaders, in power that point in time. But as we have noticed in Africa, because of failure of political leadership in the 60s, in the 70s, at some point we had 45 coups I think in a period of about 2 decades, there were 45 coups on this continent. And later, we had some countries which evolved out of those kinds of situations. One of the best examples I can give is Ghana. Ghana evolved out of that. They have had contestation for power. They have had different presidents taking over from others peacefully. They have also gone through an experience that is at times complex. One party taking over from another. And at a time when there was, I think, a difference of 50,000 votes, a new president came in and a new party, an opposition party, took over. So you can see that that country has advanced in terms of political progress, in terms of building a democratic culture. So we are works in progress as African countries. In Uganda, we have had our own experiences. The army was drawn into politics in 71. And then it was ousted by a military confrontation led by the Tanzanian forces, but with Ugandan factions, armed factions, Chikos Marum and Fronasa, which eventually created UNLA. And then, of course, it broke out war in 81. We went to the bush. We crushed UNLA as UA had been crushed in 79. So UPDF is a third army, basically. We are a unique country here. Many other countries have gone through turmoil, but they have maintained one army. Here we have the third army here. And because of failure of politics, the army became drawn right from the 60s, incidentally. So it's going to take focus, discipline, and good governance by whoever, if they are civilians, if they are retired officers or whatever, to have that consciousness that we need to build a new culture where even when you hold weapons, that you know that, yes, you hold weapons, it is a responsibility that you carry as someone who is courageous and who knows that countries must be defended and defended by armies. And you have the courage to join the army and possibly even to engage in war. But however, that does not make you any special from those who have not held weapons. That therefore a new environment needs to be established where there is mutual respect. That the armed forces or the role of individuals who participate in the armies, or navies, or air forces, whatever forces they are in, that it is a sacrifice for country, that it brings you honor, but it does not make you any special above other citizens. And that therefore we must create that environment where there's mutual respect. And also to keep building a new dispensation where even anybody who's never been in the army but wants to apply or give service to their country in terms of leadership, that they are respected for that. We have to transition out of the current situation that we found ourselves in, to that new situation. It will have to evolve. And then also one hopes that because whatever gentleman says does not necessarily have to be what happens. Saying, I mean, as the Americans say, talk is cheap. Anybody can say whatever they want to say. At the end of the day, it's dependent on what the citizens want. And if they have got the resolve to stand by what they want and work for it until they achieve it. Because once you have a citizenry that is highly politically conscious, knows their rights, they want to pay attention to whatever anybody says. They'll say, we have our rights, we pay taxes, and therefore we are going to do what we want. And if they have those capabilities, yes, something like that simply will not keep manifesting. That what they desire and want is what will manifest. So it's contention. It's a contentious issue. However, it's an issue that cannot simply be wished away. It's an issue that we must apply our minds to and resolve it. I mean, we have seen many other countries where wars were waged for countries to become independent. And people who have never stepped in the army are voted for and they lead. But even those who are in armies, when they retire, they become, participate in local politics or national politics, and they're elected and they also lead. So it no longer becomes a factor of whether someone was ever in the army or someone has never stepped in the army. No, it becomes a question of we as citizens, we have rights to choose as we want. And therefore, we are looking for someone with such capabilities. And then they vote for such a person. Now, the complication we have here is that people lack confidence in themselves first. They think they must depend on the goodwill of, a few people in the political class. So it's a real question that we need to contend with. And two, it cannot be wished away. It's there, it's alive. We have to keep working on it until we evolve out of it.
All right. So, General, I have two more questions in light of the incidents that have been happening on the scene. And I hope you can, in about a few minutes, you can answer to them. I want to hear your comments. One is on the political prisoners. It is a tool that has been used by the present regime every after election. We have the likes of Dr. Besigye, who were arrested, the likes of Kabaziguruka, I'm just citing a few mentioned, the likes of Kakweza, who is now, out of the country because he fled for speaking against the regime. And then we have the likes of Olive now. What do you make of this for every after election? These are Ugandans, their resources being spent, people are being arraigned in court, moreover, court martials. What do you make of this for a regime that is continuously using this? And what do you think we need to change for citizens who are actually politically persecuted? And then two, somebody in the comments would like to, and which is really on the economic element, you to weigh in on the coffee amendment bill, which is before Parliament, because that feeds into the economic question of the country. Somebody before we came on the call said that the regime does not want Ugandans to get rich, so so they are using the bill to frustrate us. What do you make of that? Just those two before I give you two last questions, because we need to be out by 8:30. Yes, General.
Okay, the first one, maybe let me start with the coffee question. Fortunately, there are many educated people now who have gone into coffee. There's a time when it was only peasants who were in coffee growing. I have a sense that there are many people who are educated who have gone into coffee. Many people. I bump into many people who have gone into coffee growing. So my hope is that, therefore, since there are many people now who are going into coffee and they are educated, my hope is that that education enables them also to be exposed. Also, too, that education enables also to be courageous, to understand that they have got their rights and that nobody should walk all over them. The only way you can resist those kinds of ill-advised interventions by a regime like this is to organize. People need to be organized and put up resistance. Because one thing I don't understand is after the collapse of cotton and tea is in a state of disarray as we speak. And now if coffee follows and goes also in a state of disarray, where does this regime expect to be getting revenues from? Simply can't understand. But we cannot depend on their sense of doing what is right. Many times they have clearly shown us that they have completely lost direction in regard to application of sense in doing things. So it must not be dependent on those who are in the industry itself to become a center of resistance and actively work against the passing of that bill. But even if it passes, because there are many people in parliament who can walk and chew gum at the same time, many now existing in that parliament, and therefore highly undependable. So in the event that it passes, then people who are in that industry now need to do like what the business people did. Because if they don't, that coffee industry is going to be ruined. They must not give it time to reach a point where the coffee industry is brought down to its knees. Because it's a livelihood for many. There are people who have invested millions of money in coffee. People have grown 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 150 acres of coffee. So if they remain sleeping, they pay a price as the country pays a price as well. There is nothing that is ever good. Anything good comes out of effort, relentless application of effort to overcome any form of impediment in your way. So if that bill passes, those who are in the coffee industry had better wake up. If they don't, there's a price to pay.
Okay, I think you made the point there. Just want to hear your comment on the question of political prisoners. What image does this portray, especially on building social fabric, trust in the question of in our question? Yes.
You see, actions conducted to create fear is from a textbook that all authoritarian regimes use all over the world. And since time, since creation, fear is a tool of control. Fear is a tool of manipulating the public mind. Fear is a tool to create paralysis in people who are aggrieved, people who are being trampled upon, to remain paralyzed in a state of fear so that they don't fight. Basically, that's what it is. And it is used all the time. There is nothing new. Nobody should be surprised about it. The only new thing would be that those who are targets for fear from any regime first know it and not allow themselves to cow to fear. Because that's the only way you overcome fear. That you organize and the population stands up and says, look, we pay our taxes. You are supposed to use our taxes for delivery of services and building a stable foundation, the base of which a country can be well governed. If you are incapable, get out. If you want to hang around through the use of weapons, then it means that the only thing left now is this population to know that, you know what, we have to resist. That there is risk, yes, but that our desire to live as free men and women is more important than us living in fear and letting a bunch of men and women to ride roughshod over us. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever number of years it takes for the population to wake up and say, we can't take it anymore. That repeats itself through history, since time immemorial, since creation. That has happened over and over. It's nothing new. It is only when a population reaches that conclusion and takes action that is able to free itself. But also to recognize that there is risk in the process. So nobody should, be surprised by what is happening. It has to. As long as anybody wants to hang on to power, they will have to create fear. There are no two ways about that. So the question is, do we cow to fear? If you do, you remain under subjugation. If you say, this is crap, you are using our taxes to manage a country. We are the ones who pay these taxes. We know there is risk. But our desire to live as free men and women is more important. Would rather die in dignity than keep eating food in our houses and living, but in a state where we are humiliated as a people, where we are not able to exercise our rights. It's a choice. It's nothing new. It has happened since creation. And until a time when, as they say, the lambs will lie in the bosoms of lions, we have not reached there yet. Leaders have to be checked. You don't depend on their goodwill. And a society which reaches that level of building capabilities within itself to check the abuse of power, that society will live or create conditions in which men and women can live as free men and women in dignity. Dignity of men and women in any society does not fall like rain. It's fought for. That's what many people seem to forget.
Okay, General, you make very, very strong points right there, especially about dignity. General, as we conclude our conversation this evening, just two more questions that I have. In case those who are on X, in case you have a question, please, you can send in your request. We'll be able to accept it. But if you also have if you have a question, you could put it in the chat. We'll be able to ask General your question. General, I have one or two last questions before we top the hour. So I want us to use the last few minutes to answer these two questions. General, how do we deal with a looming monarchical question in this country, as a country? And what are you, as the Alliance for National Transformation, doing, especially to tackle this question of the looming monarchical question of governance? Then finally, General, in light of the next, maybe could you paint for us, as you conclude this conversation, could you paint for us what you envision the next 62 years of governance of this country, and what you as the Alliance for National Transformation is doing to ensure that we have that you wish for the country? As somebody who's been very passionate about seeing positive change in this country. In case you have a question, those who are on X, please, you can use the link to ask your question. I'll be able to ask it to General, and then I will also, if you want to ask directly, you can send in a request. We'll be able to accept that. Yeah, General, in just about 5 minutes, General.
Our main focus as Alliance for National Transformation is to keep reaching out, trying to influence through all nature of communication, reaching out to Ugandans who understand our message, who recognize that nothing good can ever happen by accident, that the only way we can have a better future, that there must be deliberate, conscious actions taken by those who believe that we need to have a better future, and therefore to build a foundation on the basis of which we can influence the country to move in that future. And we know there are Ugandans who understand that. And therefore, our role is to try and reach out to them so that they come part and parcel of building that vehicle that we are sure that the moment you get, say, every out of 10 leaders or members in the party, that the majority of those are people who want to build a foundation on the basis of which you can have good governance, that you can have equal opportunities, that you can have equality before the law, that none will operate above the law, that you can have institutions that can deliver services in all sectors or endeavors in life, that you can have justice, that even as a peasant, even if they don't have money, their land is grabbed by anybody who has money or maybe is in a position of power, that the justice system will deliver justice to this peasant, regardless of the person they are contending that property with, has money or has influence. We have to build a society of that nature because we see countries which function like that, where people are equal before the law. Where you can, here you talk about like there being no services, like drugs in hospitals. There are countries where it is a given. I mean, you would not even think that there's a time when there are no drugs in a hospital. That's what it's supposed to be. Raising standards of education. There are being jobs. And the people who access those jobs, to access them, not because they have paid a bribe, not because they have got an uncle or a mother or an uncle, an aunt or a cousin in a position in that government department, but that they get that job because they have the qualifications and they have attended interviews and they have been the best. Those systems function elsewhere. It's only here in Uganda when you say these things, people say, that is not possible. So you ask yourself, why would people give up? Because there's nothing which happens elsewhere, as I indicated before, that can't happen here. We are the same human beings, same capabilities intellectually. And there are many Ugandans who, if they were in positions of responsibility, that would create those systems and institutions be established. But they have to break out of the fear that paralyzes them, or they have to break out of the sense of saying, politics is not for us. So nature hates vacuums. You plug out, the crooks plug in, and you pay a price. So we keep on communicating over and over until we galvanize a significant number of Ugandans who are able to become members and also offer leadership in ANT. So that we build a credible vehicle for governance so that in the event, at whatever point, by God's grace, when NT takes power, that we know that that is going to be the terminal point at which we talk about poor governance, that we can start a new chapter. That even when people make mistakes, that they have got the conscience to recognize where they have made mistakes, but also apply the capabilities which are God-given to resolve whatever mistakes, and therefore build a new culture. That's what we keep concentrating on. And therefore we keep calling upon the Ugandans. But also to keep encouraging Ugandans who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable being in ANT, to concentrate effort in building any other vehicle of governance, any other party, on the same foundation of values, to have value-driven political organizations, to have value-driven leaders in politics. Because that formula, first, we don't have rights over it. Anybody can apply it. But it's the only logical way out of the mess in which we are. That there has to be a vehicle of governance, in this case, a political party, one or two or three, which are built on those foundations. Any party, it doesn't even have to be ANT, any party that builds on those principles to know that any political organization which succeeds to break this country out of the vicious cycle must be a value-driven political organization. As of necessity, therefore, that it has to be run or managed or led by a significant number of leaders who are value-driven. Nothing positive or fundamentally different from what has been happening for the last 62 years is going to happen unless we have value-driven leaders becoming, getting to the forefront of politics and being the dominant factor in any party. They must be the dominant factor because you can't have 100%. But when you go into a party and you find that the dominant force within that party, out of 10, 7, 8 are value-driven leaders, that organization will change the trajectory of politics in this country by whatever name that party goes. If on the other side, from the other, if no organization succeeds to do that, if the state of things remains the way it has been in the last 62 years, where you find that out of leaders in parties, that 3 are value-driven, 7 are driven by self-interest, nothing new will happen. We'll remain in this vicious cycle. And Ugandans had better wake up. That's the only way out. You don't have join ANT, look for another party that has the same principles. Join it. If there is none, build one. If you can't come into ANT. But create one that is driven by men and women who are value driven. There is no other solution. Anybody who tells you different is just giving you a pipe dream and it will not work.
All right, General, you've really given such a very powerful closure. I'm just trying to run through comments and questions that come from X as we wrap up. We up on top of the hour. X, somebody I think has highlighted that somebody is asking and saying General Mugisha Muntu as a retired just served closely with General Museveni and the government. He severally made like quarter penny is put by Ahama and removed by Ahama. And now the son, who is the CDF, makes similar statements. I think they want your comment about that. I don't know, you can confirm that.
Repeat the question. I didn't pick the question. The first part of it.
It's a comment, I think. He's saying that I would like to ask General Mugisha Muntu, as a retired general who served closely with General Museveni in the bush and the government. He severally made statements like a quarter pin is put in
okay.
by...
That's what, I think he's attributing a statement to me which didn't come from me. It came from another colleague who's been in the leadership in politics for a while.
I think that
I can't speak to that because I never made that statement myself.
All right.
It was made by a colleague.
All right. I think the other comment, generally, is this one I said thorough, but my question is that some of Johns in the country, especially areas of Isinja, Rakai, are not fully aware of our party. What plans do you have before 2026?
The biggest challenge so far has been adequate resources to continue doing the exercises we've been doing. We've done them in some districts where we have established, we operate at the sub-county level, we go to the sub-county, we meet opinion leaders in those areas. We speak to them, we have conversations with them, they ask questions, we respond. Those who are convinced join the party, and then we establish branches at the sub-county, at the parish, and the village. And we had hoped that by the end of this year, would have done possibly 80% of the districts. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that yet. All that is dependent on resources. We're going to continue applying effort in raising resources, and we'll be able to cover the country to the extent that we're able to raise resources. However, we are people who keep moving regardless of the conditions we operate within. And therefore, yeah. Outside that, we use, of course, the social media, we use radios, we use TVs. We're about to establish an online platform on the basis of which we can organize. Maybe that will make things much easier for us.
Okay, so General, I will go to the other comment. Someone wants to know how in the Alliance for National Transformation will guarantee protection of their wealth and investment in the event of political transition in Uganda. General, what's your comment there?
We are a disciplined political group. As a party, we believe in the rights to property. We believe in justice. We believe in fairness. We believe in transparency in the management of national affairs. We are not a bunch of people who are driven by greed. We're not a bunch of people who want to run people out of their properties or businesses, take them over, as happens quite a number of times since our independence, and as I see in many African countries. Basically, we're a disciplined team of leaders, and that's why we keep on attracting more and more to ourselves, so that when you're in power, you know that you are there to serve and build a country. Where one of the things that I think everybody is in search of happiness. You want to create an environment where people are happy. you know, and that's another subject maybe for another day, because it seems that people think that they can only get happiness out of stealing money.
Yes, General. I think somebody has said, thank you, General. Do you think there can be change of government in Uganda through the ballot?
There can be change of government through different ways. What drives us in Alliance for National Transformation is the end state. You want to take power and transform a country. Now the means, whatever means, for us, we are applying effort to take power through the electoral process. But to respond to that question, anybody who wants to end up in power, by whatever means they want to end up in power, whether through the electoral process, whether through military means, whether through civil disobedience or civil disobedience, you have to organize. You have to organize continuously and be prepared to take power through the avenues that you have chosen to take. We keep organizing ourselves, believing that we could reach a point where the population will be so fed up and they will listen to our message and they will respond to it positively, and that will give us momentum, and that momentum will be unstoppable by anybody, by whatever means they may want to stop it, and that we can take power. We believe that. Now, there are many people who may not believe that. I have no problem with them. But we're not swayed by what other people believe. We are driven by what we believe, and we organize around what we believe. And we know that human beings have made the advances they have made in all areas of endeavor, in science and technology, in the politics, in warfare, in whatever they do, when they believe in whatever they have chosen to believe in, and they have the resilience and the courage and the discipline to keep organizing towards that objective. Always, history has proven that such a bunch of people, or even individuals, eventually succeed. One thing I know for sure, whether anybody else believes it or not, is that ANT as a party will take power in this country one day. by God's grace, and that it will transform this country. And therefore, those who believe that join NT and we move and prove to those who, for whatever reason, don't believe that, to appreciate it once it becomes fact. Because that always happens in life. When people who believe do things which many other people don't believe in, when what they believe in happens, it becomes fact. It becomes self-evident. And in a sense, it liberates those who would have held unbelief. That has happened in many things in life. It's not only in politics. Many things.
All right. All right. I think those were the questions. Maybe the last one. Somebody is saying that we are in the mood for the 2026 elections. How, as ANT, are you prepared for the elections? But also, as somebody who has spoken very passionately about structures, are there instances you, as a founding member of this political party, have you reviewed your strategy? Because also to take over power, it means that you need to review your strategy. Are there instances where you've reviewed your strategy in light of even the elections that are coming up? Or we continue building in the hope, and when can we actually say that this shall actually be brought to life? That's
building and reviewing is a continuous process. We are not blind to the fact that there are many times we meet challenges, but we have the capability to understand where we are meeting difficulties, and we're also able to understand where we have weaknesses. And when we find that there are weaknesses in application of maybe certain methods, we're able to carry out corrective actions. So we are flexible, but at the same time, there are things which we believe in, which are so fundamental that we know you cannot divert from them. Yes, you can make adjustments. Yes, adjustments. But if you find that something is so critical in your pursuit of a certain end state, keep reviewing it. But if ever after review you find that you are still in the correct direction, stick to that direction. Don't be frustrated or diverted because you have met impediments for a long time in your movement in that same direction. This is a challenge in life because many people give up at times and they find that they're about actually to reach a point of breakthrough. So I agree. I entirely understand. You must always be alert, because if you get stuck in a wrong strategy, you will never succeed. That's also on the underside. If you're applying a wrong strategy which won't work, it won't work even if you keep at it day and night, even pour resources and time and effort. It won't work. But if it is a strategy that will work, even if there is a delay, if you remain focused and you don't get diverted, you don't lose, you don't become frustrated, and you keep at it, the strategy works eventually. So you must keep on doing analysis, you must keep on doing reviews, you must keep on trying to find out, is it a correct strategy or not? That one you must.
All right. So, General, we've come to the end of the conversation. I would like you to state to us your parting shots, even as we gear to the next elections, but also your parting shots for whoever is listening in, for all the Ugandans and different people who have tuned in this evening. The future governance of this country, General. What are your parting shots in terms of, in light of the apathy you've told us in this conversation that there's fear, in light of the fear, what do you make of the future governance? of this country as we wind up, General?
I don't know why people fall into that trap of being frustrated. You know, the levels of apathy are frightening. People withdraw from politics. Why don't people withdraw from trying to make money? And how many times do they fail? People fail all the time, but I have never had anybody who have said, I have given up on trying to look for money. Why is it that they do everything until they go down the grave? They will, I mean, people even start businesses in their 60s, in their 70s, still looking for money. Many people fail many times, but they keep looking for money. When it comes to politics, they give up. And yet politics is at the core of our lives. Actually, when politics goes wrong, it actually also messes you up in your pursuit of many other endeavors in life. I can't decipher that yet. So we will have to keep talking to people over and over that don't give up on something which is so central to your life on this earth. Because when you are still on earth, politics is what makes things work on this side of heaven and hell. If you're going to drive on a good road, that's politics. If you're going to have drugs in hospitals, that's politics. If you're going to have high standards of education, that's politics. If you're going to go and get a job without bribing, and you get it through, fair, open, transparent recruitment processes, and you are the best, and you got a job, that's politics. You go and you invest your money, and nobody comes and takes away your business. That's politics. You question a leader and nothing happens to you. That's politics. The opposite of that, when you don't get all that, when all that goes negative, that's politics. How can anybody give up on politics? It's at the core of our existence, this side of life. Before people go to hell or heaven, whichever they are working for, they must know that politics is at the center of their lives, this side of life. If they want to have a good life, they had better invest effort, time, resources in making politics good. How can something, I can't understand how that can't be so obvious. That the people spend, for people not to recognize that, you pay your taxes and someone comes and walks all over you. And you say politics is not for me. What are you doing on this planet? Thank you, Peter.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to thank all listen to us, those who have asked questions, those who've made. Richard, bless you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, General, for sparing time. We thank you for also sharing your insights and perspectives. So this conversation has been proudly brought to you by the Alliance for National Transformation. These conversations will keep happening, and we hope that the next edition, once it happens, you'll be able to tune in for much insight and much perspective, just like we've had from General. Thank you from wherever you're listening us from. We thank you for tuning in, and may the good Lord richly bless you. Till next time, we wish you well.
I was feeling bad.
Well done, though. You didn't sound like you attack. The soldier you are.
That one is different.